Arizona Telecommunications and Information Council and Gazelle Greater Arizona Educational Leadership have been leading the development of the stakeholder network. As I think you all know, that many tribal, rural, and other underserved communities in Arizona don't have fast, reliable, and affordable broadband, and many Arizona citizens still don't have the technology and skills to participate effectively in the network world. The stakeholder networks is made up of public, private, nonprofit advocates and stakeholders, and we want to provide opportunities to build a constituency, to network, share information and resources, and collaborate on broadband initiatives. Okay, what's going on here? Oops. Okay, what happened here? There we go. Okay. So we hope that the network will lead to collaborative projects and grant applications, sharing of funding opportunities and other resources, aggregation of demand at the state and local level, discussions, recommendations, policy plans, etc. And I just want to mention that we are not going to be a policy organization, at least at this point. We might be talking about planning policy initiatives going on in Arizona, but we're not going to have any formal planning or policy making or enforcement authorities. So again, we have public and private advocates from economic development, education, local and state government, health service, public safety, libraries, etc. Just some of the organizations that we're collaborating with include the Arizona Commerce Authority, Arizona Technology and Education Association, Arizona Telemedicine Program, Sun Corridor Network, Arizona Technology Council, the Arizona State Library, and more. So just quickly, our priorities for this year is to do a couple of statewide roundtables, some webinars, periodic newsletters, posting on LinkedIn and Twitter. We're developing a comprehensive database to be able to communicate about things that are going on. We'll have our website with a calendar, broadband information, contacts, and so forth, and discussion of policy, telecom policy issues. So with that program today, I'm going to start, Jeff, with you. As broadband, Jeff is the Vice President, State Broadband Director for the Arizona Commerce Authority. And frankly, I'm going to let him tell you about his job. And I got to say that Jeff, he knows this. I've told him many times that he's, how long have you been there, Jeff?
8 months, like 9 months now.
8 months. He's done just an incredible, amazing job. And we're really lucky to have him in that position. So with that, Jeff, I'm going to run your PowerPoint.
Great.
And there you are.
Okay. I think you're cutting off a little bit of the bottom of the screen, yeah. Steve, if you could slide that up.
Yeah, I don't know if I can do that or not, Jeff. For some reason, that first page does that.
Okay.
The second page seems to be okay.
All right, great. Jeff Sabatka here. As Steve had mentioned, I'm the State Broadband Director for the state of Arizona and Vice President at the Arizona Commerce Authority. This first slide, or title slide, I think is really appropriate because just like water is the lifeblood to agriculture and so many other industries, I believe that broadband is the lifeblood of the next generation and current generation industries in terms of manufacturing, transportation, and communications. So we're very excited to be a part of this. On the next slide, I don't know how much everyone knows about the Arizona Commerce Authority. Sometimes I take that for granted. We are the Governor Ducey's economic development arm. We're tasked with statewide economic development, specifically attracting companies to Arizona from other parts of the country, expanding our existing infrastructure and businesses, and creating partnerships with entrepreneurs to create new businesses here in Arizona. I welcome you to take a look at azcommerce.com, the website. It's a great organization that they have chosen to put my office as part of that group. And there's a lot of cross-pollination there, specifically with broadband and the ability to bring companies from rural areas. The first 2 or 3 things that these folks are looking at when looking at sites is access to broadband. So the Arizona Commerce Authority is very active in this mission. Our next slide is the 2019 strategy, and this is something we came up with when we came in. In the past, there have been a lot more focus on drawing maps and documents, and we have some great documents and some not so great maps. So we decided to approach this from more of an action-oriented mentality, and specifically, the first thing we try to do is meet with cities and towns in their communities to understand a little bit better what's going on. I felt for years that folks in Phoenix didn't always understand the unique problems and the unique opportunities in these communities. So I've spent a lot of time in my truck driving around the state, meeting with different stakeholder groups. And I've been to every county in the state except Graham-Greenlee. And I'm super excited to get out and get out there. We've got some great opportunities going on with our far eastern counties as well. We develop a broadband action plan. In the past, there's been state plans, and we are working on more of a broad state plan, but that takes time. But developing a broadband action plan within each community, I think each community has to look at themselves as their unique, look at their unique assets and their unique challenges. A city like Clarkdale, Arizona, for example, has quite a bit of municipally owned or run towers where they could hang wireless gear. They also have very hard rock out there, so it's difficult to trench to put fiber in, which lends itself to different types of businesses. Payson, Arizona is very geographically isolated from a broadband network perspective. They didn't have a whole lot of redundancy, so middle mile solutions were needed up there. Yuma, Arizona is one of the largest agriculture areas in the country, maybe the world. They have a whole unique set of needs up there. And again, you're talking about agriculture, you're talking about very large geographic areas and wireless. And then down in Douglas, Arizona, they're building a new port to bring trade and traffic across the border from Mexico. We're working with the community already to make sure that they have sufficient broadband in that area. And carriers that do business down there already, and others are interested in that process. Which leads to our next point, which is bringing partners to the table. I think it's important that communities look outside of what they have, and first off, meet with your existing providers to see what they are doing. Are they spending money in your community? Do they value the business of the community they're expanding? And if not, let's look at some other options. Carriers that have stepped up and jumped in aren't necessarily just telecom carriers. In many cases, infrastructure providers, companies like APS, the Sun Corridor, which is a confederation of the 3 state universities, has been very helpful in helping us understand where the needs are for education, for higher ed in particular, and GSECA, which is a group of rural electric co-ops. Rural electric co-ops in other parts of the country are very active in the broadband space. They just have not been here in Arizona, and the group GSECA has been very helpful in helping us understand what they can do. Assisting with broadband funding opportunities. As you know, this is not inexpensive. We have been working with state resources as well as federal. Many of you are probably familiar with the program that came out of the Corporation Commission a few years ago for E-rate, and get quite a bit of, I believe it was $123 or $128 million in federal funding to expand networks to K-12. Fantastic idea, but we need to build upon that and make some of these programs work together. Last year, we had our first rural broadband development grant. This grant was geared towards helping fill in the gaps where there was an economic need. We had 2 different grants, an A grant and a B grant. The A grant was for what we call shovel-ready projects. These are folks that have a plan, that have been working at it in some cases for years. They know what they have to do. They just needed additional money, or they had something that was revolutionary, that was going to change the economic complexion of that town. We saw a lot of these great programs. We had 13 applicants. Unfortunately, $3 million only goes so far in this business. We had 3 winners of the A grant and 4 winners of the B grant. The USDA Reconnect program, which we'll hear a lot about today, is a fantastic program for the smaller communities. We have a winner who will be on the call as well to talk about his company's experience, and we're super excited to partner with the USDA and with smaller carriers and small communities to make that happen. And then lastly, we want to promote duplicatable wins. Not every community is the same, I get that, but each community is unique. We can also learn what's worked in those communities and try to combine them with what is available. In the instance, for example, of Apache County, the carrier laid additional conduit in the trench when they were building a very expensive, very long time-consuming E-rate program. That additional conduit is something that these other communities are looking at now for economic development and medical and other areas. Our next slide is just kind of a rundown of some of the things we've done within the year. I don't want to bore you with all this, but a couple of things are really important that everyone should understand. Our state land department has been very, very helpful in this process. State land in the past, it was very difficult to get any type of build done on state land. They have a constitutionally mandated charter where they have to receive a rate of return on everything they do, whether they sell it or it's used. We've worked within that to come up with a very clear, understandable set of rules for electric utilities that cross state land and their ability to sublet fiber. This is quite frankly a game changer because of the next one. We worked with APS from the very beginning on this, and APS has now decided to jump wholeheartedly into the dark fiber leasing business. To give you some perspective, APS has 24 strands of fiber today between Phoenix and Flagstaff. They'll be moving to 432. So this is a big change, and they're a great partner. As you can imagine, when you talk about fiber strung along the largest power lines, those are areas that will, the mean time to repair will be very quick because they have the folks in the field, because the power supply is so vital to our society. Broadband action teams or BATs, that's something we've worked with in a lot of different communities. We have very large broadband action teams in some of the larger rural communities like Yuma. We have smaller ones in some of the small communities. And we do have a meeting first Tuesday of every month with all the various state agencies. I thought it was interesting that none of these agencies were really talking to each other about broadband, even though they were in the broadband business, whether they wanted to acknowledge it or not. You had groups like ADOT and DPS and Department of Education, the libraries, all were in broadband, but were unaware of what everyone else was doing. What we found is by bringing everybody together at least once a month and sharing their projects and talking about what parts of the state they're doing things, we have the ability to leverage that, leverage fiber builds, leverage rights of way and things such as that to get stuff done quicker. If you take the next slide, we're going to talk specifically about our broadband grant. In 2019, we had $3 million. We have, and that was again geared towards the A grant, the shovel-ready projects, and the B grant awardees. These projects were very diverse, yet they were all vital to these communities. The Payson network is going to be part of a very large ring that will connect a good chunk of the White Mountains communities together. We'll hook up a lot of businesses and medical facilities and government facilities in Payson and create a whole different level of redundancy and service in that area. The Bullhead City project with Mojave Electric Co-op is truly a game changer. As I mentioned before, rural electric co-ops have not done business like this in Arizona in the past. We're very excited about Mojave and what they're doing because every single person in that community that receives electricity from them is going to have the ability for incredibly fast and reliable bandwidth, better than the city of Phoenix. So I can't wait to see what happens with the community of Bullhead City in the next 10 years. And then Page, as many of you know, is a huge tourist town here in Arizona. When people go on vacation, they like to take selfies, they like to take videos, they like to upload them. They like to log in and check their email from work. Unfortunately, there were some real bandwidth choke points in Page. A lot of their business is done today via microwave. Basically, this will establish the first fiber optic line between Phoenix and Page and provide a lot more bandwidth to everybody in the community. The B grants are all different in their own way, but they all have one common theme, which is they have big ideas, they have big plans, but they want to hire a consultant to take a look, to do the numbers, to put something together. And if everything goes well, hopefully we'll be applying for the A grant here in the next year. I don't know how many of you follow politics here in the state, but last week, Governor Ducey gave his State of the State address. I could not be more excited from a broadband perspective, what the governor has proposed. It's nothing short of revolutionary than what we have here in Arizona. We had a lecturer here who lectures on rural broadband from the University of Iowa a week ago, and she could not believe that we're doing this because Arizona has never spent money on this type of infrastructure in the past. And this is a game changer again. As much as the APS thing was great, this may be even better. 59 million to install over 500 miles of conduit and fiber optic cable along Arizona highways. The fiber optic cable will be used to serve government functions, smart highways. I know here in Phoenix, when you're driving around and there's a wrong way driver or a silver alert, or even once in a blue moon we have a bad weather issue. They do that. There's stuff in the pipeline in terms of managing traffic. There are the potential for self-driving vehicles. All these require broadband, and this is the type of infrastructure that will begin that process. Border to border on I-40, New Mexico to California. We're talking Flagstaff all the way down into Phoenix, and then Tucson down to Nogales. These are all incredibly important commercial routes. And will lead to economic development not in just the main communities, but the local communities along the way as this infrastructure gets built out. Much more to come on that, but just know that it's an incredibly ambitious program. I tell everybody I talk to, we got to get behind this because we have a very rare opportunity here in that we have funding available. We have a governor who understands this and wants to help rural Arizona. And we're going to go ahead and make this happen in a very short period of time if this funding is approved by the legislature here in the next, let's just hope, few months. Sometimes these sessions drag on a long time. Secondly, $10 million for grants. We had $3 million this year. I can't believe all the stuff that we were able to get done with 3 leveraging it. We had some really interesting applications this time around. One in particular, they just need more money than $1 million. And we're hoping to look at expanding some of this. We're going to take a look at what worked and what didn't work with this year's grant. We're going to tweak it a little bit, but we feel very confident that we can find $10 million worth of fiscally responsible, solid projects to bring broadband to rural Arizona. Next slide is just a really quick, and I'm certainly not going to steal Brian's thunder, but I can't be more excited about the USDA Reconnect program. It was $600 million last year we're giving away. 550 right now, and I believe we have more coming, and he can talk to you about. Super excited about that program. The FCC has also announced a rural broadband program geared more towards 5G. I've heard different figures from 20.4 million to 9 million, and retasking certain federal funds. These are all great, but as I've mentioned to Steve and people many times, the problem we have in Arizona is the middle mile. The middle mile is getting from communities like Williams and Holbrook in the north to Phoenix or Las Vegas, or Douglas and Nogales up to Tucson and Phoenix. If we can solve the middle mile problem between the APS fiber, hopefully Tucson Electric will jump into this program as well. And with the government function of the state highways for the government offices, we're really attacking this middle mile problem because, as you know, when you start talking about 5G, it's going to require a tremendous amount of backhaul from these communities. Because when people are presented the opportunity to use bandwidth, they use more. They find new ways to make it happen. And we're super excited to part with our wireless carriers, the AT&T and T-Mobile and Verizon and Sprint, to bring 5G outside of the Phoenix area. It's not going to happen tomorrow. The reality is that this is a new product, and it will happen, and as it is right now in Los Angeles, and Phoenix and Atlanta and places like that. But as they get good at this, and as the market, just like 4G, it will spread. We have to be ready for that spread by getting our infrastructure together, also making it incredibly easy for these companies to do business in your community. They will require access to light poles and structures because that's just the nature of these business. The communities that step up and make it easy for carriers to do business in their community are at the front of the line. I see this over and over again. We had a meeting with all 3 of the big carriers and some elected folks, and they reiterated that. Make it easy for them to do business in your community. And if they will, do that, you get all kinds of ancillary benefits. Folks want to work from home. It keeps cars off the road. I was in Prescott a couple months ago, and I sat in a traffic jam in Prescott. And coming from a guy who grew up here that used to spend a lot of time in Prescott when I was a kid, I couldn't believe it. But these are the kind of things we have to do. It keeps the air clean, and it also drives economic opportunity. Many, many companies will allow people to work from home if they have sufficient broadband access. That's what we're striving for. So again, I'm here. If you take a look at the last slide, you've got my email address. Feel free to reach out. Feel free to call me. I would love to come out and meet with you in your community. If there's anything that we can do differently or better, I'm certainly open to suggestions. We're learning as we go here. And my boss made the comment one time, we're building the airplane as we fly it. And many days, that's what we're doing. But we're putting the time in, we're spending time on the road, and super excited to partner with the federal government, in this case, USDA. And I'll go ahead and I'll turn it back over to you, Steve.
Okay, thanks a lot, Jeff. It was great. Good job. Really appreciate it. So I'm going to stop sharing his presentation right now. If any of you have any questions for Jeff, if you'd like to go to the chat function at the bottom and submit your questions, and Oris will monitor those questions. And
we have one question, Steve.
okay.
And this is from Brian Smith. Is the state of Arizona going to lease fiber out for backhaul to providers?
As of right now, no. The initial build is specifically for state of Arizona agencies and affiliates. Right now, we're going to work to make our government network better, but certainly that's something I would like to see down the road.
Another question, how do you apply for grants?
So if you look at the last slide, and hopefully Steve will get a copy out to everybody, azcommerce.com/broadband is our state broadband page. Admittedly, we need to jazz it up a little bit. But we post all of our announcements. We post when we hear about federal grants on there, as well as our state grants, and that is our public face for the broadband department.
Just FYI, okay, let me get in the picture here. So when you get after this event, you're going to get a follow-up email with a link to our survey on our website, and you'll be able to download all the PowerPoint presentations. You'll have the contact information for all the presenters, including Jeff, so that you can do any kind of follow-up that you would like. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. So what's going on here? Okay, so I'm going to hopefully seem to be having a problem here. Okay, here we go. Okay, I was going to ask you to chat with us now about what some of your interests are, but I think we'll wait until afterwards to do that. So I want to move on with Brian. Welcome, Brian Smith. Brian, as I mentioned earlier, is the General Field Representative for Arizona and New Mexico Telecommunications Program for the USD Rural Development. And he's going to be talking about the Reconnect grants. And so with that, Brian, you're on.
Okay, it says you have to stop sharing before I can share.
Yes, I probably do. Okay.
All right. I did want to share this first, just to show everyone that someone sent this out today. This is very important to know. If you're a Chiefs fan, you're going for Roseanne, and if you're a Niners fan, you're going for Full House. Okay, so what I really wanted to share, and hopefully you guys will be able to see this. I'm going to do a little bit more than I kind of anticipated because I saw some of the parties on here. So I'm going to just change up the PowerPoint a little bit to one that I have to go ahead and share this with you. And so my job, can everyone see that okay?
Yep.
Okay. So my job, I work for rural development, which is part of the USDA. And I work for a portion of rural development, which is called the Rural Utilities Service. And what we do is I work in the telecom division. We have an electric side. And what we do is help provide phone service or telecommunications such as broadband, which has kind of become our primary mission to rural areas. And so we have several programs that help to do this. And so I'm just going to go through these with you. And then, you know, whenever you guys are ready, I can take questions after the presentation. And I wanted to thank Jeff for his help so far, because I've seen, I kind of had to compare things in New Mexico and Arizona. And New Mexico was really far ahead of Arizona, but since Jeff's come on board, I've seen it catching up really quickly with the support of the state, which is something that I think in the past, until the past couple of years, I really hadn't seen much here. And once the state started supporting things, it's moving along really rapidly. So you're catching up to New Mexico, and also I've been covering Colorado, and they're pretty progressive on this stuff. And Arizona is moving right along. And I can't tell you how many people I've had talk about the I-40 and the lack of fiber up there. So it's just exciting to see this stuff going on. So the first program I'm going to talk to you about is our DLT program, or Distance Learning and Telemedicine program. Basically, it's to provide equipment or last mile connectivity to a facility that is providing either telemedicine or educational services such as a school, a health clinic, community college, a hospital. And I'm just going to go through this really quick, and I'm going to move quickly here. Basically, it's a program that comes out, and there's a FOA every year, and it can have certain changes to the program, but basically it's a competitively scored program. And there's 3 objective categories, which are rurality, economic need, and special considerations. Special considerations can be things like a trust area, if it's tribal, sometimes is available, STEM programs, opioids. STEM and opioids were the last 2 years for special consideration. And before that, it historically has been tribal considerations. Economic need is calculated off of what's the SAPE scores. And then rurality is by census data. And then you can do a subjective category where you write a narrative and provide up to another 30 points for the need and benefits. And that's a lot about community support and stuff like that. They added this 2 years ago, and last year was the first year that we actually allow for 20% of the grant funds from the request to be used for providing that last mile connection. And I think this could be a big deal, because one of the problems we have is some of these facilities, you know, maybe there's fiber to the node down the street, and now you can actually use 20% of those funds to bring that to your facility, which could make a big difference in whether or not telemedicine is even for you, because we know if you don't have the connectivity, it's kind of not a great point to even go for this kind of thing. As long as it's 15 days prior to the final application due date, you can contact me, your friendly neighborhood GFR or general field representative, to assist you with it. Beyond that, it's because it's competitively scored, we can only do so much. Who can apply? Here's some of the different entities that are eligible to apply. As you can see, it's pretty wide ranging. This is the definition that they use for a consortium. I'm not going to read it because, you know, it's not very exciting. And here's some of the eligible purposes for the grant. So getting eligible equipment. We will do leases, although those tend not to be as cost effective as a purchase. We can construct those broadband facilities to actually use your equipment, as long as it's not more than 20% of the grant amount. Acquiring instructional programming, and getting technical assistance. And those costs can't exceed the 10%. Here's some of the ineligible purposes. I'll give you an example. On that first one, it says to pay for medical or educational equipment, not having telemedicine or distance learning. I had someone who wanted to get a mammogram equipment covered because the mammogram was read remotely, and well, that's not really a distance learning or a telemedicine purpose because it has to be sent off. It's not being read in real time. If it was something where, you know, it was emergency services and it was being read in real time, then it would be understandable. We don't pay for EMRs, and just whatever you're doing has to have a 50% purpose for administrative or for telemedicine. And none of our programs do we pay for salaries or administrative expenses. Those are ongoing costs that a company should have or a business has anyways, so we won't pay for your FTEs. And then there's some other things listed on there. Here's some of the stuff we do cover: computers, networks, inside wiring, the audio and video equipment such as you're using today, telecommunications terminal equipment, audio and video equipment, and facilities that are broadband if they're owned by the applicant. There's a matching contribution that is required, and that's 15% of your grant amount. And this just talks a little bit about that, what's eligible and what's ineligible. We don't do in-kind contributions anymore because we had several difficulties with those. And basically, you need to be in a rural area, economic needs, service, and benefits. Those are the considerations under that. And there's a link to the website. Next, I wanted to talk to you about the Community Connect program. And I think this is a great one to use as WeCom, who's going to be speaking, originally applied for this for their Peach Springs project, and they were not able to do it yet. They were able to come back in and go under the Reconnect program with pretty much a similar application with some modifications and go ahead and get that Reconnect grant. So Community Connect program, it's been around since 2002. It's a competitive grant program. There's some interesting regulatory stuff there on it. Every year we release a FOA funding. It used to be a NOSAS listed here, funding opportunity announcement, and we'll tell you what any changes are and what the requirements are year by year. As of right now, and I think this is going to be for a while, if your speed is less than 10 down and 1 up, you're eligible to apply for this grant. And when you apply for it, you need to be providing 25 down and 3 up. Basically for us in this program, broadband service would be anything that's terrestrial based. We're not going to count satellite against you. However, as of right now, and I knock on their door every time I get the opportunity and ask them to change it, cell service, if it's LTE, does count against you, which was the issue that we had out at Peach Springs. Again, broadband grant speed would be the 25.3. Insufficient would be below 10.1. The minimum grant amount is 100,000 and the maximum is 3 million. Here's some of the eligible applicants types: a tribe or tribal organization, a state or local government, incorporated organization, cooperative, private corporation, LLC, for or not for profit. Individuals and partnerships are not eligible for this program. And obviously an applicant must have the legal capacity and authority to apply for funding and enter into a contract with the federal government. And obviously they must be able to legally own and operate a system. In this program, basically you draw your own service area. You make sure you're not going to overlap an existing area that's already providing that service. It has to be contiguous, and some of the requirements of fulfilling it are you have to offer free service. You don't have to provide it if they already have it, but you have to offer free service to a critical community facility. That would be like a fire station or police station, public library, hospital, stuff like that. You have to provide a community center with computer access points, free to all users for at least 2 years, and it's open and accessible to area residents. One of the ways this has been done is historically, sometimes they'll go in a community center or community library. I've seen one in Alaska where they actually created a little cafe with free access in there to fulfill that portion of their obligation. The PFSA is the publicly proposed funded service area. Again, you draw that. Rural, basically, in this program is defined as a population which is not located with 20,000 or more inhabitants and is not an urbanized area or contiguous to an area that has more than 50,000. So, you know, if you're in Tonopah, they're determined that you're right next to Buckeye, there might be an issue. But that one is just an example that came to my head, and I can't say for sure whether or not that would be accurate, as I don't know what's out in Tonopah for service right now. But I would look at that one. Again, the 10-1, it can't exist in any portion of the eligible PFSA. If it does, your application will be thrown out. And we will check. As an example, there was a grant application in Alaska. I flew into Fairbanks. I drove down to, I think it was Delta Junction. And I met some guys by the bridge, and I got in their boat, and we took their little boat with an outboard motor up the river to their island for me to check and see if there was service available. So we take it pretty seriously. Basically, again, this is just kind of going over some more of the eligible purposes. And basically, we're not going to duplicate broadband service, and we don't pay for operating expenses on this portion. Matching contribution is 15%. If you spend less, then you have to contribute. You can contribute less. It's not about your dollar amount; it's about your percentage. And here's some of the scoring stuff. There's up to 100 points available. The PFSA challenges, local participation. That means like community support and things like that. And then your experience in management is 10 points. Here's some of the other factors, which I'm not going to bore you with, but it's rural. And we do have a thing that I think is important to mention, and it's been used for a couple applicants, which is SUDA, which is substantially underserved trust areas. So if you are serving a tribal area, you can receive extra points for that. Here's some more information on the Community Connect grant program, and this will be available in the PowerPoint. I'll email it to Steve after this as a PDF to make it easier if that works. Finally, I wanted to talk to you about the Reconnect program. This one I like to talk about after Community Connect because I like to think of it as Community Connect, but much better. So Community Connect kind of came out of the 2018 Appropriation Act, and there was $600 million in funding for that program. And they did a round one out of that. And the round one allowed for $600 million in tiers and blocks. And then after the subsidy rate was calculated, we have another $500 million, which is the current funding round. In addition to that, as Jeff mentioned, in the spending bill that was passed on December 21st to keep the government open, we got another $550 million for this program. And we don't know for sure whether they're going to add that to the current funding cycle as well as have another funding cycle, or if they're just going to have a couple more funding cycles, because after subsidies, that's going to pretty much double around there after the subsidy rate is calculated into that fund. So basically, this is all about service. If you have service less than 10.1, this is the program that you can actually bring service of 25 down and 3 up to that area. Wow, this really shrunk. Okay, so I'll just go over this for you. So on the applications for that first round, for the 100% grant category, which was 200 million, we had 522 million in applications for that 200 million, and that was 78 applications, and that was 34 states. In the 50-50 grant application category, we had 53 applications for 637 million. So that is, you know, in 100% grant, we had 522 million in applications requesting for 200 million. In the 50-50, we had 637 million, and that requesting under that 200 million. And then in the 100% loan, we also had 200 million, and that was 258 million in applications. So a total of 146 applications for $1.4 billion. Let's see here, my thing decided to quit on me. There we go. All right, so who can apply for this program? Well, there's lots of people that can apply for this program. State or local governments, a territory of possession, United States, an Indian tribe, a Self-Determination Education Assistance Act. I'm not really too much sure about that. I haven't come across that one. Nonprofit entities, for-profits, LLCs, and cooperatives or mutual organizations. And I think we've had, I'm not sure about nonprofits or the self-determination. I think all the other categories we definitely had applicants for. What are some of the things you have to have when you apply? You have to have a unqualified audited financial statement. You have to have a fully complete application, which is done online. You have to have a timely build out. These projects have to be completed in 5 years. So you have to have a realistic build out completion. You have to be financially feasible and show that you can self-sustain. That's going to be reviewed by financial specialists, and we're going to have technical feasibility review. That's going to be reviewed by engineers. Your service areas have to be completely defined and drawn out. Unlike Community Connect, they do not need to be contiguous. So you can take blocks of areas. Say you're a current provider and you have these areas that people have been calling you for years and you can't just get to them. Well, you can go ahead and draw those areas and say, I'm going to provide one here, one here. In New Mexico in the last round, I went out and visited some where they had like 30, 40 service areas. And these were areas that it was just totally unrealistic for anyone to get a return on their investment by providing service. So it was the perfect use of this program. So here's some of the different combos this time. So in the 25-3 for a loan, you can, if you're going to provide 25-3, you can get a 2% interest rate and up to 50 million is your max award. So you can do some serious stuff with this. It's open, meaning non-competitive. So it's really about applications being complete. That's 200 million in that. In our combo grant loan program, which is 50-50, that one is competitively scored, and we have 100 million in grant and 100 million in loan funds for that. In the all grant category, again, you have to provide the 25-3. We'll do up to 25 million, and you have to provide 25% matching funds, and that's competitively scored. And again, we have 200 million in that category. So this just kind of goes over that last screen a little bit. Basically, up to 50 million for loans at a 2% interest rate. In your combo program, that interest rate for the loan portion would be about around 3%. It's federal funds rate. It's competitively scored. And then in the grant program, you have to provide a 25% match. For the 100% loan program, and this is actually, they changed this last year. These had different categories, and so I just updated this slide this morning. Basically, all of them now, the area has to be 90% unserved, or they have to have speeds below 10.1 in 90% of the households. We go out and we check. We're going to look at infrastructure. We're going to talk to people in the community. We're going to do background research. They have a desktop research team to make sure that what your application states is correct. We understand, I just want to make this very clear, we understand that the form that the FCC receives from the carriers is not always accurate. And sometimes carriers put one thing down and reality is something completely different. You can still apply if it states that. You need to make the case for why that is. And we're actually going to go out and we're going to physically and technically do some research and to determine what the actual speeds in the area are. And, we'll verify it. So don't, if it says one thing, but that's not reality, don't let that hold you back from applying for this program. Here's some of the eligible costs under this program. Construction or improvements of facilities, including buildings, land, and required to provide the broadband service. We can pay for up to 5% of your, well, we can pay for up to 5% of the award for pre-application expenses. Most companies hire a consulting firm. You have to do the audits as well as engineering, and all that costs a lot of money. What you're going to do has to be terrestrial based. Can it be wireless, point to point? Yes. Can it be fiber? Yes. Can it be satellite? No. The cost must be reasonable, allocable, and necessary. This is going to be reviewed by engineers and financial people to make sure that things are reasonable in that category. And if any of those things are found to not meet our criteria, basically your application could be rejected, or those costs could be rejected. We do have a thing where if you're doing a loan, you can acquire an existing system. We know that some of the providers want to get out of certain areas, or that's something they haven't wanted to provide service for. So there's an opportunity, say someone wanted to buy out that plan and upgrade it at the same time. That's completely reasonable to do with this program as long as it doesn't exceed 40%. Here's some of the scoring criteria. The rurality, if you're serving farms, how high your speeds are, how many businesses, how many healthcare centers, how many educational facilities, if you're serving critical community facilities, if you're on tribal lands, and then if the state is supporting you through broadband, which Jeff worked on this last time, so they clearly are. Here's how that breaks down. So you can get up to 25 points for rurality. You can get up to 20 points for farms served, or ranches, I should say, since that's important here in Arizona. If you're going to have to provide higher speeds, you can get more points. Businesses, and again, as we talked about, it has the different things. I'm going to say this because I've just seen this as a problem. If you want to serve a tribal area, make sure you are speaking to the people at the tribe in order to serve them, and you're in communication with them to work a plan with them so that you can actually have their support. We do the applications online. The website is reconnect.usda.gov. You got to have a DUNS number and be registered at sam.gov. And we have workshops that are getting ready to ramp up now. There's going to be one in Washington. The second week of February, I'll be in Denver for one. And then there's supposed to be another one, I believe, in DC or Dallas. I have a sheet that I can send to anyone who needs it. Again, the website is reconnect.usda.gov. They like to take the questions for this and actually go to that Reconnect website and hit the contact us. They like to log all the questions so they can use all the information to improve the program. Most questions are responded to within 24 hours. They have people dedicated to answering them. So if you have a low level question, I'm more than happy to help you, but you have something very technical, I suggest you go through that system so you can have an official response that's reported and unofficial documentation to your answers in case it ever comes up when you apply. Again, there's that website, and there's my email, brian.smith1@usda.gov that you can reach me at. And you know, I'm open to any questions, or we can do that later, however you prefer to doing it.
Let's go ahead and do questions now. Oris.
Yeah, we've got a number of questions here. Well, first of all, will we have a copy of the slides provided, Steve?
Yes, they will be on our website
Okay.
early next week, probably, possibly tomorrow, but early next week.
Okay.
PowerPoint. And this presentation is also being recorded, and that will also be available on the website.
Okay, for Brian, when will the $10 million rural broadband grant be open for applications? I'm
not sure which one they're referring to, if they're referring to Community Connect or they're referring to this current one, Reconnect. Community Connect is supposed to be announced shortly. And there is actually, if anyone emails me, I will send you a link for all notifications, and you can sign up to receive these notifications in your email so you know when the grant windows are open for everything. Starting on the 31st is when the Reconnect program is starting to accept applications, and they're accepting them through March 16th.
Okay, thank
For
you.
this round, and there should be a future round as well.
And next question, this is a little lengthy. How much value is ascribed to innovative uses of telecom that aren't typically those that Brian has indicated? For example, we have a large new mine in the neighborhood. They do much of their work remotely and via advanced visualization techniques. So do their Arizona located vendors, large construction and technology companies do the same thing? It would be great to be able to provide resources for locals to become conversant with these new industry opportunities. Would that fall under the, would that be qualify?
It sounds like it's something that might work as like a distance learning type thing. It sounds like it's more of a learning thing, but it depends how you're doing it. If you're going to do it for a strictly educational purpose, then you would be able to use it. It's not going to fall under the other programs, but it sounds like it's more of maybe a STEM type educational thing. So it just depends how you put it together, whether or not it would qualify for.
Okay.
It's pretty technical, so it's hard to determine exactly what that would be or how it would look.
Here's another one. I currently live in a city where I have a 1G down. It's essential to my work dealing with visualization. 10 megabits per second down would clearly be inadequate. It's not really broadband as commonly defined in industry. Comments?
Yeah, the FCC defines sufficient broadband service as 25 down and 3 up. So if you have 1G down, you are very blessed. I live in Goodyear and I pay for 300 down and I get about 150. So I would like to have more, so I understand what it's like to really want that and what you can do with it. But to most people's shock, you can look at the numbers of how many, we had 1.4 billion applications for areas that did not have 10.1. So that's pretty telling how much and how bad the service is out there, to know that while you might not find 10.1 adequate, there's obviously a need for much less. I mean, it's much worse out there than we could all imagine.
Okay. And how do we know what the actual speed of broadband is in the community? Is 90%, for example, or that is 90% below 10.1?
Well, that's going to be dependent upon how you draw the service area versus the community. So when the service area is drawn, and Paul could maybe speak to this later about, or even now, I don't know, it's up to you, Paul, but how you made that determination to figure it out. I think it was a little bit easier out there because there was pretty much next to nothing, but you would have to look at the data, maybe do community surveys. You could contact our state office. They do have a program, a Rural Business Development Grant Program, which allows for feasibility studies for things like these. So you can actually find out what's needed to do this in your community. You could look at the national broadband map, although I haven't found it to be most reliable because I think it's still going off carrier reported data. And as I saw earlier, there was a question about carrier speeds being different than what they actually are. And so we do understand that again, but I would say community survey and speed tests in the community.
Okay, and one final question. Are networks that support public safety in the local rural community eligible for funding?
For our programs, we are concerned about households. So you have to serve households, and the speeds that are there are counted off. And I should have made this clear earlier, I apologize. So thanks for the question. The household speeds. So whatever the big name provider is might be providing broadband speeds as defined in this to, the businesses. The big money is not from the household, so maybe they're not providing it to the household. Or even if the businesses have sufficient access, but the households don't, that's what we care about for qualification and for eligibility.
Okay.
So, Horace, I think there was another question that was for Jeff.
Yeah, I didn't know if I should.
Yeah, why don't we
You
do
want to
that
cover it now?
while we're at it? Sure.
Okay. This is for Jeff Sabatka specifically. How is the ACA advocacy reflected in the policies of the Arizona Corporation Commission, which determines what electrical and other utilities should and can provide in support?
So the ACA and the Corporation Commission are two very different bodies. I like to tell people when they ask about my job, I say I'm more of the Surgeon General than the Attorney General. The Corporation Commission is more of the Attorney General. They actually have the ability to enforce policies on certain types of business, and they deal with everything from gas pipelines, electric rates, not as regulated with broadband as they used to be. As far as advocating, we're really not in a position. I'm not a lobbyist. That's not what I do. But you know, we obviously converse with the ACC as well as every state agency to talk about the importance of broadband, to give them examples of what's going on here in the state and where we feel like they can make a difference. But two very different, and unfortunately, I'm not in a position to influence their decision making one way or the other.
Thank you. That's about it, Steve.
Okay. So let's move on. We have one more presenter that we're anxious to hear about, and Paul, who's been through this process and can probably talk about the good, bad, and ugly, but his accomplishments. So let me get to, first of all, get my camera here, and I want to share. Okay, so now I want to welcome Paul Fleming, who, as we mentioned earlier, is the COO and Vice President of WeCom Inc. and DataMax Wireless. And as we mentioned, that they were a recipient of $1.6 million and Reconnect grants to serve Peach Springs. And so he's going to share with you their experience and what they're doing. And so, Paul, am I running your slides or are you?
Do it. It's not a problem.
You want me to?
No, I'll do it.
Okay, it's all yours. Oh, I
You
gotta
want this-
stop. I gotta stop sharing here. Okay.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. First, I want to say thank you to the Arizona Broadband Stakeholders Network, the state of Arizona, the Telecommunications Information Council, Mr. Peters, Mr. Sabatka, Mr. Smith. Thank you all for having me on today. I appreciate it. All right. Some of you I've met before, and I know some of you guys are new to me. My name is Paul Fleming. I am the COO and Vice President of WeCom, and I am the owner of WeCom. We've been in business for, I think, 65 years now. And we have a few different divisions. We have a construction side of our company, which we do everything telecom related. We build a lot of towers. We do a lot of work for AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, those guys, putting new antennas up, new fibers, ground up builds, everything telecom related for a cellular company. We have our own service provider network. So we own our own fiber, our own microwave, our own fixed wireless, and we do all of our own construction for that too. So everything we have, we build internally, we manage internally, and we operate it all internally. We do have a division that does two-way radio also for the police, fire, local municipalities, etc. We have an office in Phoenix, an office in Kingman, and then an office in Las Vegas, serving both Arizona and Nevada. As mentioned before, we did apply and we were awarded for the 100% grant program through the USDA Reconnect. Our proposal was a hybrid design. Basically, we were building fiber for backhaul, long haul, and some last mile, which included all the critical care facilities. and everything else we were covering via a fixed wireless solution, which was mostly residential. We initially wanted to build fiber to everybody, but due to some cost restraints, land restraints, and other issues we ran across, building fiber to everyone didn't make sense. But with the fixed wireless technology that's available now, the newer 60 gigahertz and teragraph solutions that are coming out that we'll be deploying, giving 100 megs per subscriber was not going to be a problem. So we were able to basically create a hybrid design where we did use fiber for all critical care facilities, last mile, in some instances, middle mile, long haul, and the rest was covered in a fixed wireless scenario. The total project, although we did apply for the 100% grant, as most of you know, it is not technically 100% funded. So the project total was $2 million. Let me get to the next slide. Sorry. The project total was $221,917,000. We contributed $555,000, and the USDA contributed $1,666,000, which approximately covers about 90 miles of fiber build and 10 fixed wireless hub sites that we're doing. The concentration, or the main focus when we were doing this, was the Peach Springs and Wallapai tribe area. So our initial build is there, but of course our goal is to use the network to expand to as many rural communities and underserved as possible. Let's see, our initial coverage covers approximately 400 households and 30 critical care facilities, including medical clinics, schools, jails, governmental offices, and much more. It's a huge win for us and for the state, and a big win for the Wallapai tribe also. The Wallapai tribe presently has very little internet access in Peach Springs and for the tribe themselves. And so by the time we're done, there will be nothing less than 100 megs per subscriber that we put out there. So the tribe and the Peach Springs area in general, they'll have nothing less than 100 megs per location. Their government locations are actually going to be 110 gigs, but there won't be anything slower than 100 megs. I wanted to kind of just touch on a few challenges, a few bullet points that we experienced as we went along. A few recommendations or encouragements, I would say. It can be a tough process, without a doubt, but don't let that discourage you. We actually have applied once during the stimulus package when Obama was president. We were the highest recommended grant out of Arizona, and we did not win. We applied for the community grant, as was mentioned earlier, and we were also denied that. There was a small pocket where Verizon did have service that would hit 10 megs, and unfortunately, the rules were stated that you could not win if there was a cellular provider. It was understood by the USDA that a government and a city, a community can't run off of cellular hotspots, but the rules were stated like that, and so we did lose that time. So this is actually our third attempt. The third time is a charm situation. So I can tell you, don't get discouraged along the way. It is a hard process. It does take up a lot of time. If you break the grant into sections and you kind of tackle it section at a time, I know everyone on this call could be successful and could make a huge difference for the state as we move forward. Start early. There's a number of reasons why don't try to plan this where you're going to get it all done in the last month. The USDA is great to work with. They do their best to answer all questions quickly, but they're a large organization, a lot of moving parts. So you can't expect to send in a question and get it answered the next day. You need to be able to give them time to answer your questions or find the answer for you. So they were really easy to work with, but it's all time consuming. So make sure you start early and you're ready for that. There's also a lot of moving parts that are outside of your control. For example, we don't have a professional engineer that works within our company. So once we were done with the network design and everything finished, we had to find an engineering company who would review it and stamp it. So that timetable, that's outside of our control. Same with the entire build. You have to have studies done with the Game and Fish and the state land departments and everybody else to find out, do you have any endangered species or any specific land that's considered sacred in some reason or anything else being disturbed. So these are all things you have to have done ahead of time and submitted with your grant. And so they all take time, and they're all dependent on people outside of your organization, working with the Forest Services, et cetera. So I highly recommend that you start early with a goal to finish early, so that you have plenty of time to work with all those other organizations that you'll be dependent on. That was one of the things that we found towards the end that kind of got us, is we didn't realize we thought we knew, but in the end it didn't. There were more people outside of our organization we'd be dependent upon for answers. And so we had to really rush to get some of that done in time. It would have been nice if we would have started a little earlier. One thing I will recommend is to lean on the state. Jeff and the state of Arizona are fabulous to work with. Right now, they're doing a great job pushing the broadband agenda, trying to really close that digital gap, and they were all fabulous to work with from top to bottom. The state land department, the broadband department, all of them. So I highly recommend that you get them involved early and that you lean on them for a lot of support. They can definitely get you. You'll need letters from the governor's office. You'll need the state broadband plan to be able to submit with it, letters from senators or other representatives, and the state of Arizona does a great job helping facilitate all that. So share your ideas with them early, and I recommend you work with them as much as possible, as they're great to work with. One thing I can also, or one other item I would recommend is, if you're a municipality, a town or so forth, I would recommend partnering with a telecom provider. And if you're a telecom provider, I would recommend partnering the other way around. I know there's a lot of small communities out there who want to go for this grant, but the USDA does a good job of doing their due diligence, and there's a lot that comes to running the network that they're going to question you about: building it, running it, who's monitoring it, who's repairing it. So just beyond getting it built initially, there's a lot that they're going to want you to be able to answer, such as how are you going to get the upstream, to service providers so you can get out to the internet, your backhauls, once it's all built, who's going to manage it, who's going to monitor it, who's going to do all these different items. So if a community that's in need is able to partner with a telecom provider, or in a lot of cases it's been electric companies and so co-ops, to provide that service, you'll find that you'll have a lot more traction, and you'll be able to really cross off a lot more T's and dot a lot more I's, being able to create that. And that's what we did on our end. We have a good relationship already with the communities we were working with, and we increased that relationship. So we partnered together, showing our expertise in what we do and their needs and how it would help. And that was a big win. And I do highly recommend that if you're a telecom provider and you have some great ideas, I'm sure, and thoughts of how helpful it will be, you work with that community to establish that relationship with them, and vice versa for the communities. I recommend you find a strong telecom provider that you can work with, and you'll find that your overall application, in my opinion, will be a lot stronger at the end. Follow the guide. We got in trouble a few times where we fell outside of the guide, and if we would have stuck closer to it, we would have come up with the results that they were looking for. So I do recommend that you follow the guide intently along the way. One item that was really a big success for us and was that we really built deep community involvement. As it was mentioned earlier about trying to figure out, well, what areas do and don't have the proper broadband speeds and whatnot, we went to the communities and did polls. So we had a lot of great ideas. We could bring service to this rural area. It's going to do all these great things for you. It's going to give you all these opportunities. And internally within our company, yeah, our ideas and our engineering, our thoughts were fabulous. But we took it further than that, and we actually went out and we met with the tribal councils, the police chiefs, the fire chiefs. We met with the local governments. We spent time with the local medical facilities, the local jail, and we went to all these places and we spent, honest, serious time with them, trying to develop and learn what are your needs. If we brought this to you, how could you use it? How would it help you? And by the time this was all said and done, we were really able to establish a great relationship with the community, the different communities we were looking at serving, and really understand what their needs are. And we were able to portray that back to the USDA in a way I think that helped out a lot. And on the flip side of that, we were able to gather their support at the same time, because you'll need the support of all the local, basically the local governments. You'll need letters from the tribal council, and you'll need letters from the local fire departments, and you'll need letters from the local police departments on not only on, you know, them supporting your program, but also on how it will help them. And so by establishing those relationships, I think it made a huge difference. So I recommend, as a telecom provider, if you're looking at doing this, you really spend some serious time out in the community and meeting with them and figuring out what they're going to do. I no doubt that there is a slew of very smart people on this call with fabulous ideas, but working with those communities intently and intimately will really help you out. Sorry. You know, it's internet's becoming a lot like electricity. You know, in the past, electricity and highways wouldn't have been built all over the country without funding sources. You know, they're extremely necessary and every community needed them, but that didn't mean they were going to be built. It's very similar with the internet. There's a lot of communities that do need it desperately, and you can show those needs top to bottom, but because the ROI is so difficult on providing a rural community without a funding source, it'll often never get done. I mean, I can come up with plan after plan on building out to a rural community, but you know, if there's 3,000 people there and it costs me $15 million to build, there's not going to be a good ROI on that. And a standard business is not going to invest that money because they don't want to go, obviously they have employees to take care of them. They don't want to go bankrupt. So it's the standard thing. So those funding sources from the government, you know, the state and federal government are continually developing are an extremely great way to go about trying to get that funding to help close that digital gap and really provide a great service for the rural America. You know, and I know it was quick, but that's about all I have. I want to thank everyone again for having me. I'm happy to take any questions if you have any. Feel free to email me if you have any questions, but that's all I have for now.
Okay. So Oris, any questions for Paul?
No, there are no questions yet
Okay.
that we haven't covered.
Okay, so we're just about at our closing time. Couple of quick things. If you have any questions, we can take them for the next couple of minutes. So please go to chat and submit those questions for any of the folks on the panel. So I want to thank Paul, first of all, for first congratulations on the project. Sounds like a great project. You're doing some great service for Arizona, and we really appreciate it. And so thank you for participating today. And Brian, thank you. Hopefully, as you said, that Arizona is on track to compete with other states in getting funding using the federal USDA funding for our projects. And before I forget, I don't know if Janet is online or not, but many of you know Janet Major, who is with the Arizona Telemedicine Program. But Janet has recently been elected chairman of the United States Distance Learning Association. And so we just wanted to say congratulations. Janet has been involved with us over the years as a member of our leadership team and so forth. So I wanted to say that before I forget. But anyway, Brian, thank you, and I appreciate you, all your efforts. And last but not least is Jeff. Jeff, thank you again for helping to put this together, and also more specifically to thank you for all the work that you have done in the short period of time that you've been here. It's just incredible what you've accomplished, and you have become a great asset and resource for the state of Arizona. So we really want to thank you for that.
Steve, we do have one question.
Okay.
And I'm not sure to whom this is directed, but what if local existing providers are negative on the potential competition with public funds?
As far as the USDA is concerned, if they're not providing the service, then, you know, we don't have a problem providing funds. So, you know, it's not really about that as far as we're concerned. Obviously, they're not going to be supportive of your project, but if the community is and you have a competitor who is willing to provide the service, then you're welcome to apply for the funds.
Okay.
To follow up on that, yeah, there's definitely scenarios in our win that the existing providers are not happy about what we're doing, but we were able to get with the community and we did surveys. They had a couple like community fairs, and different kind of like celebratory type things going on during that time. And we set up questionnaires during that and asked people like, how are your speeds, how it's going on? And then we were able to set up where we kind of went I wouldn't say door to door, but found a few community members and went to their houses and did tests and gathered a lot of information that showed that, yeah, there's definitely there was a lack of broadband in that area. And so once we were able to prove that, yeah, the other providers weren't happy about it, but they weren't providing what they were saying they were providing, and they weren't providing what was needed. And we were able to go from there.
Thank you.
So Jeff,
Okay,
do you have any closing remarks?
No, Steve, thanks again for helping to organize this. And I'd like to thank both the other gentlemen for taking the time to do this. I can't stress enough how important Reconnect is to our extremely rural communities. And we are here to help as we can. And we encourage you to organize, find a carrier partner. This stuff is very technical. They want to know what the nuts and bolts cost. And there are several great carriers here in the state. And go for it. Would love to see more of these wins. I can't tell you how excited I am to go up to Kingman next week. The USDA is coming in from DC for a huge press event. And everybody from the governor's office on down is incredibly excited about this win. This is our first win here in Arizona. We hope to multiply that by quite a few in 2020.
Okay. So just the last closing remark. Again, I mentioned earlier that you're going to get an email with a link to our website to do our survey. You'll find the PowerPoint presentations, the contact information for our presenters, and so forth. I really encourage you to fill out our survey. It's very simple. It won't take you more than 5 or 10 minutes. But I do like to get feedback. I always forget to tell you that I'm still on my training wheels in terms of the webinar. And so sometimes things work right like they're supposed to, sometimes they don't. And so, but I would like your feedback on how we did, how the program went for you, and so forth. But even more importantly, that as we continue to develop our the Broadband Stakeholder Network, that we want to know what we can do for you. What do you want to know? What can you do? How do you want to connect with other people?